YouTube, what is up? James, MTG Biggie here, and today we're back with another standard deck tech for Ixalan Standard. Now, if you've been following along for the past week or so, we have done Grixis Control, we've done blue-red spells, we've done red-white aggro dinosaurs, and now we are back with a new deck that I think is the most exciting to me for a couple reasons. The first being, I don't think anybody really thought that it would be a deck or that it would be possible, and people kind of weren't excited about the power level of this potential deck. And it's also one of my favorite tribes in all of Magic the Gathering since literally forever. I've always enjoyed this tribe. I've always enjoyed this creature type. I play this creature type in Modern. I would like to play it in Legacy eventually as well. And of course, I'm talking about Merfolk. Everybody's talking about pirates and dinosaurs. I'm over here like standard blue-green Merfolk. Looks surprisingly good when you break it down and build a solid list. And I think we've got a good list here. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'm sure some tuning is necessary. But upon looking through cards and figuring out what works together, I think this is the sort of direction you want to point your Merfolk list. So, with the boring stuff first, the mana base, we are on 4 Unclaimed Territory, which just fixes colors for our Merfolk perfectly. 4 Botanical Sanctums. We're on 5 Forest and 6 Islands, and 2 Hashep Oasis, which is actually very solid. It allows us to pump a guy for 1 turn, just sacrificing itself. So it helps. We're not going to flood out too much because we have some stuff to do with our mana. Then on the 1-drops, we have a solid 4 of Kumena's Speaker. It's a 1/1 for 1, but it gets +1/+1 if you have another Merfolk or an island. So really good 1-drop. After turn 1, it's usually a 2/2. We have Merfolk Branchwalker, which is a 2/1 for a green and 1. And when it enters the battlefield, it explores. So you get to flip the top card of your library up. If it's a land, it goes to your hand. If it's not a land, you could dump it into your graveyard, or you could keep it where it's at and put a +1/+1 counter on the Branchwalker. So it becomes a 3/2 for 2. If you notice, there's sort of a theme going here where the creatures don't have huge bodies, but they have a relevant way to get bigger pretty easily without jumping through many hoops. We're on 4 of Metallic Mimic because this card is bonkers in this deck. And the reason why is if you play Merfolk in Modern or Legacy, you know that that deck requires a lot of Lords, which are other Merfolk that make your Merfolk bigger when they're in play. We don't have that in Standard. Instead, the running theme with Merfolk in Standard in Ixalan is +1/+1 counters. And you get bonuses for things having +1/+1 counters. And there's a lot of synergy involving it. So Metallic Mimic is tailor-made for this deck because everything that enters battlefield after it is getting a +1/+1 counter. And then rounding out the 2-drops, we have Deeproot Warrior. It is a 2-mana 2/2. Then when it becomes blocked, it gets +1/+1. So it's a hard creature to block. Also, if it comes in after a Mimic, it gets a counter. And we have a bunch of other ways to get +1/+1 counters on our guys. Then we move on to the 3-drops. This one is one of the best creatures in the deck. Shapers of Nature. It's a 3-mana, a blue, a green, and 1 for a 3/3. And it has 2 abilities. You pay 4, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Or you could pay 3 and remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control and draw a card. So, if we go kind of crazy with the Metallic Mimic and all the other ways to put counters on our guys, we could draw cards, or this thing can just sit here and make sure everybody gets a counter, everybody gets a bonus, and that we are not only going wide, but going big as well. We have a way in this deck to make a lot of mana. I'm going to get into it later. So once you see how it all comes together, you can see how abusable this card is. Then we're on a 3 of Kopala, Warden of Waves. It is the legendary Merfolk. A lot of people are talking about it seeing some play in Modern in place of Kira, Great Glass Spinner. But it's a 3 mana 2/2. Our opponent's spells that target our Merfolk cost them 2 more to cast. And the activated abilities that do the same cost 2 more to activate. So this guy does a lot. It really helps protect our dudes. Lets us kind of curve out and go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop. If this is the 3-drop, then every Merfolk that we have on the battlefield is pretty hard to kill with 1-to-1 removal. So it's a definite auto-include. It is legendary, so we're only playing 3. I could see going down to 2 possibly, just because you don't want to get stuck with it in your hand. But definitely worth drawing. So 3 is kind of where I wanted to be. Then we have 3 of Watertrap Weaver, which is a 3 mana 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, it taps down a creature our opponent controls, and that creature doesn't untap. This is our Merfolk Reflector Mage. It stalls out a creature for an entire turn cycle. It also allows us to tap down a single blocker and attack through it. This card's really good. Reflector Mage got banned in Standard. This is slightly worse, but synergizes with Merfolk. And it has a 2/2 body, which is a little bit better than a 1/3. Very, very solid card. That's why it's in the deck. I have been more and more impressed every game I play with it. So that is a 3 of. Then another 3 of 3-drop is Vineshaper Mystic. This is our 3-drop that allows us to put counters on Merfolk. A 3 mana 1/3, and when it enters battlefield, we put +1/+1 counters on 2 different Merfolk. So we could put one on any other guy and itself, or 2 separate guys. Allows us to spread the counters wide again, and kind of build up our army. So very solid there. Then moving on to the 4-drops, we're on 2 of Tempest Caller, which is another insanely good creature for us. It is a 4 mana 2/3, which is a little expensive on the curve, but our curve is topping out at 4 mana. When it enters the battlefield, it has the Cryptic Command ability of tapping down all of our opponent's creatures. So we're building up this small advantage, playing 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, multiple 2-drops, whatever. Everybody's getting +1/+1 counters and growing, and we're going wide and big. And then on turn 4 or 5 or 6, we get to cast this creature, tap down their whole team, and alpha strike them, which is very, very solid. Those of you that play Merfolk in Modern, it's kind of how it works with Lords, but instead of tapping their guys down and attacking past them, you just give your guys Island Walk, and you give them an island with Spreading Seas, and they can't be blocked. We can't do that here. We don't have Island Walk anymore, but tapping down their team is just as good if you're just trying to swing in one time and win the game. And playing to that same sort of effect, we have a 3 of Herald of Secret Streams, which is a rare 2/3 Merfolk for 4, Merfolk Warrior. And creatures we control with +1/+1 counters on them cannot be blocked. So you see where we're going here. Everybody's getting +1/+1 counters. The guys with +1/+1 counters, when we draw this, can't be blocked. So just like tapping down our opponent's team and attacking through, we could just cast this and attack through in many cases and win the game in one shot. Or even if we don't have a wide army, the guys we have are getting through, so we could chip away and build up an advantage that way. Then we are on 4 of Blossoming Defense. This is just the best, easiest answer to brick some removal from our opponents, along with Kopala. If your opponent spends 3 full mana for Fatal Push, and then you just Blossoming Defense in response, it feels really, really bad. So we're making it difficult for them to remove our guys. We're protecting our guys. We're building our guys up. And we are building an advantage and eventually winning the game. Now, going back to Shapers of Nature, this card from earlier, putting 1/1 counters for 4 mana. 4 mana seems like a lot. And this is where the kind of X factor of this deck is that kind of pushes it over the top, I feel. In Growing Rites of Itlimoc. Everybody is super excited for this card and the implications it may have in Modern. A lot of people didn't expect it to get there in Standard and still don't. And I'm telling you guys, this card is the truth in our Merfolk deck. Games where we're able to curve out 1, 2, 3 into this, plus a 1-drop, and then it flips the next turn and gives us basically Gaia's Cradle, are insane. I've done it a few times now, and the Gaia's Cradle side allows us to make a ton of mana and just start dumping counters on our guys with this. It's a nice synergy. Not only that, like, it can excel, and even if we don't have this mana sink, there's ways we can spend our mana. So there's also a 1-drop I considered playing that has the first Shapers of Nature ability built into itself, where it can put 1/1 counters on itself. I felt a little weak with it to use, but it can be. But still, the Growing Rites of Itlimoc, it just allows us to dump a ton of counters into play and really lets us overrun our opponents. It is like when you were playing Modern Elves and you just spam the overrun with Eldrick and Eldamri or whatever, and you swing through with a bunch of dudes. Same sort of thing. So that is the main deck, and it's been really fun to play. I've really enjoyed it. It's definitely a deck that I think can come through in Force in Standard. I think once Rivals of Ixalan comes out and we get some more Merfolk to play with, we could adjust the numbers and take advantage of some more cards. Over to the sideboard, we're running 3 of Spell Pierce, 1 Crushing Canopy, which is 3 mana instant. It destroys an enchantment or a creature with flying. Nissa, Steward of Elements. This is a card that I found very interesting, and I was main decking them before, and it just seemed a touch clunky. I'm not quite sure yet if we want it in our main deck. I could very well seeing it being a 1 or 2 of, but a huge mana sink if we have the Growing Rites flipped over. That was my theory crafting thought on it, but I still think it's a solid card. It's in our colors. Planeswalker gives us a lot of advantage. Its abilities are relevant. Scrying 2 and making itself bigger is pretty good, but we get to filter through our deck and just dump Merfolk into play. Starting this out with 3 or more loyalty counters, we could 0 it and immediately put a Merfolk in play. So it may go back into the main deck. I just wanted to keep the main deck as streamlined as possible. So that being said, moving on to the sideboard, we're on 2 of Perilous Voyage, 2 of River's Rebuke, which this is for the Carnage Tyrant matchups. We can also use the mana we make off of the flipped Growing Rites to pay for this easier. We're on 3 of Essence Scatter and 2 of Sorcerous Spyglass. Green and blue don't have a ton of great sideboard cards. So that's where we're at. Sideboard's still very flexible. I also considered playing New Jace in this deck. Again, it felt clunkier. Nissa felt ultimately better. But that is it, guys. Blue-green Merfolk in Standard. One of the most iconic, relevant, good, spiky tribes in Magic the Gathering ever. It's, I think, goblins, elves, and then merfolk, if you're looking at like the most competitive tribes through the history of Magic. And we may have a solid merfolk deck in Standard. I was considering playing around with a new merfolk list in Modern, involving some new cards, but Standard was more important, I think, and Modern kind of has that deck figured out right now at the moment. So either way, guys, thank you for watching. Let me know what you guys think. If you plan on playing with some fish in Standard, I know I do. I'm going to play around with this deck a lot more and try to tune it the best way possible. Let me know what you think. Comment down below. And check out some of my other deck techs. I'll post the last couple up here. And click on those. Feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll talk to you guys again very soon.